thank you so much for doing it, like I was saying, and it's really, really glad to have you here. Um, I want to give you an opportunity to share your story and to bring that awareness to the people that are watching, to the families, the caregivers, the people that are struggling. So please share your story and tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Cull. I'm 37 years old, and I'm in recovery from a 8-year addiction to opioids. And where that all started was when I was a teen, in my late teens. My father, he was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, and long story short, he lost his job, lost his license, started drinking rather heavily, and had an alcohol use disorder. And that kind of led to him taking his own life in a hotel. And I found him after he passed away, and it was devastating to me. He was my hero. He was the one who raised me. My mom's lived in the States since I was 11. I love my mom to death, but it was just him. He raised me primarily. But yeah, and it was kind of overnight. Not only are you managing the loss of your hero and your father, but you now have you have to learn how to operate a household. You have to learn how to and all this stuff that kind of came after that. And being a kid for the most part, and not having really much more experience than paying car insurance and a cell phone and rent. So I mean, it was just a shock, and I didn't know how to handle the trauma and the pain that came with it. I was just crying all the time, and it was like I just wasn't making any progress. And I started using opioids shortly before he actually succeeded taking his own life. But after the fact, I was in school at the time, and one of his last things he said was just finish school. And so I actually finished and did actually relatively well there, but I just needed a break after that. And then that's where my opioid use spiraled out of control. I started using Percocets, like 1 or 2 a day, that led up to 580 milligram Oxycontins a day for 2 years. And I lost everything that meant anything to me to that. And just went on. So after losing everything, I figured out I needed to change, and I went on a harm reduction program which I was on for 5 years to control my withdrawal symptoms from opioids. And through all that, I mean, that was its own journey. I'd spent so much money on drugs, I couldn't keep the gas on. I was stealing food to eat. I went down to 139 pounds while like going up to 4 or 5 days without eating. And it wasn't that I was using drugs; I just didn't have money to eat. And curtaining the living room off and to keep all the heat condensed in this one room with you and your little dog, and it was awful. And thankfully, though, an incident happened at a place I was working at the time, where I was just like, I quit my job that day, and was like, I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired of stealing my food to eat. I'm tired of just keeping my chin above water. I'm tired of staring at the clock all day, just wishing I was anywhere else doing anything else than what I was doing. And I was just exhausted. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Mm-hmm. And I made the decision, and I'm like, I'm gonna get off all this, and I'm gonna go and live my life. And so I created my own system to figure out what it was I wanted to do with myself. And long story short, it came down to cycling across Canada, getting off opioids, cycling across Canada while producing a documentary about the opioid crisis. And yeah, so I got to work. Had no experience in film, journalism, public speaking, public relations. I hadn't rode a bike in 8 years, and I was just getting off opioids. And naturally, everybody and their parents tried to convince me not to try to do it, because they didn't want to see me fail. And I understand they were coming from a good place, but it was the first time in my life I was doing something for me. And I tried getting off opioids a few times before I figured that out, figured out my path. But once I figured out what my path was, it turned that Mount Everest of getting off opioids into just a small step to something bigger. And once I looked at that, like it was just no factor. I did it. It took me a year and a half to taper off it all. But while I was tapering, I was working towards this other project and learning all these different skills and reaching out. And anyway, long story short, yeah, got off opioids January 14th, or sorry, January 27th of 2014. I was on the road riding and filming across the country in May of 2014. So yeah, and then that led to doing a second ride across Canada in 2016 to raise awareness about the opioid crisis, and now that's all led to do a lot of consulting work with some on the board of the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, the policy committee of the Canadian Society of Addiction Medicine, work at CAMH on their provincial system support program, and locally here in the Durham Region Opioid Task Force, and yeah, so that's in a nutshell. That's been the last 16 years of my life. So
thank you for sharing that, Chris. I really appreciate it. And, you know, I know your story, but I haven't, I guess, yeah, heard it from you individually. You know, like I've watched videos and this and that, and every time it's just like really inspiring. And you're a person that I respect, and it's amazing all the things that you have done, given, you know, the circumstances that life has given you.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you, actually. So I'm glad we're in this together.
No, for sure. Thank you so much. So, you know, you said a lot about a lot in your story, and I just kind of want to pick apart a couple of things.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, people that are in recovery may be watching this, caregivers, parents, and I want to give them as much as information as we can for them to take that information, educate themselves. So I know that sharing your story and sharing anybody's story is so powerful, but what about sharing your story? What about it do you like, or why do you do it?
Because I know what it's like to be looked at like you are the scum of the earth. I know what it's like to be treated that way. I know what it's like to be written off by your friends, family. I know what it's like to be standing outside a methadone clinic and be called a effing junkie. Mm-hmm. And when I, over the 8 years that I had seen as much as I had from beginning to end, it made me curious to see what it was like everywhere else, because it had a profound impact on my life. And I wanted to not only explore that, but I wanted to also show people that, that was 8 years of that was my 20s. And that was 8 years of my life. And I didn't start my life until I was 30 years old. So it's just like no matter kind of how deep or dark of a hole you're in, you can come back and actually live the most beautiful experiences of your life as a result of your story. Yeah. Because the thing is, I take away the positives of it. It's just like it taught me everything in life. It taught me to appreciate things. It taught me to be grateful for what I have and stop focusing what I don't. It made me more resourceful with what I had access to. It taught me how it wasn't pretty, but I mean, it taught me that I can get through a lot, actually. And you don't realize how strong you are until you're forced into a position where you have to be. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody who's pursuing that recovery path, I mean, I think that's a one common denominator that we all have in common, is like you kind of discover something in yourself after you're kind of past it, and you're looking, well, you're never really, I mean, it's always a part of your life, but when you're kind of past the thick of it, and you look back, and it's just like, yeah, you know, I can't believe I made it through that, but yeah. I did, and I want to show other people that they can too.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of people have that stigma, right, about addiction. And I've always heard it, and the media portrays it. And people that I've talked to, when they think about addiction, they think about, you know, a junkie shooting up under a bridge. And it's generalizing it into a lot of people, but a lot of people experience addiction very differently. And throughout your, you know, trip across Canada, you're able to see different addicts, and you're able to see different people that are struggling with addiction. Can you kind of break that stigma around, you know, junkies under a bridge shooting up?
Yeah, don't get me wrong, that does exist. in terms of like substance users and being at a very extremely low point. But I mean, by no stretch of the imagination is that the reality
Mm-hmm.
for arguably most of the people. It's people. I mean, there's a massive addiction rate in the trades. Those are blue collar workers who work very hard, make decent money, and I mean, it's I know, or I didn't go into my film, but I had interviewed this housewife, or sorry, a wife of she had like a big home, nice family, and everything like that, but she had hid this secret of her opioid addiction, and like, but on the outside looking in, you would have never imagined,
Mm-hmm.
and like this the story she had, and I mean, it's affecting teenagers in suburban neighborhoods. I mean, it doesn't discriminate against whether you're under a bridge or whether you're a CEO. It doesn't discriminate against what your occupation is, what your gender is, what your age is, what your ethnic background is, and it's ridiculous to think so. Well, it's absurd to me to think that that's, and I see that actually a lot at the tables I work at is that's kind of the narrative that they're pushing. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they are our most vulnerable, and we should plan for that, but by means we shouldn't be tackling the complete problem as that's the be all and the end all. And yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people always ask me, they're like, oh, I could never picture you as somebody that's, you know, in recovery. And yeah, like for myself, I was a high functioning addict. That was me, right? Nobody would ever guess because I was just high functioning. And there's a lot of people like me, a lot of people of different ages. It's not just like, you know, youth or the young people. It really does not discriminate. And that's something that it's important for people to know. And it's okay to also realize that whoever you're caring for is struggling with any type of substance use. And there's different resources and different methods to begin your recovery and to begin to have a life worth living. And for you, you mentioned harm reduction. That is sometimes a big concept, but can you break it down as to what harm reduction means to you and how you used it in your journey?
Well, harm reduction, I mean, you could use the analogy like a bike helmet is harm reduction. It's not going to guarantee you won't die if you get into a crash, but it can help your chances. Nicorette, the gum. Yeah, I know it's you're still getting that nicotine, but at least you're not inhaling all the carcinogens that are going into your. You know what I mean? Like it can, and particularly with opioids, with my path was like at the time buprenorphine wasn't out. It wasn't available. It didn't come out till like halfway through my thing, so it just wasn't an option for me. So methadone was the way I had to go. And mind you, looking back now, I went to methadone because I didn't know where else to go. It wasn't that I had any clue about any kind of options of any kind of treatment other than what I had heard from people I used with about methadone. And so that's just where I went. Had I could go back and do things differently, I don't know if I would or not, because that was just an experience that, I mean, but yeah, so I mean, what the idea is that so opioids, like say if you were taking a pill form, say I'll just put a random number out there. Say you take a Percocet and or yeah, an opioid. Say a pill will last you 7 hours. Then you're gonna go back into withdrawal if you don't have more. What methadone does is has called what's a longer half-life. So it stays in your system for the full 24 hours until you get your next dose. So you don't have to worry about withdrawal. So you can actually start to think back about going to work again and going and actually start working at things in your life without the fear of being violently ill if you don't have it. And with it being like structured through a physician prescribing it, like that's the idea of harm reduction. So particularly with opioids and methadone. But I mean, I definitely, with your buprenorphine coming out, I would definitely suggest people going to that versus the path I took. It's just the anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, yeah, harm reduction is reducing the harm of something, right?
Yeah.
And there isn't necessarily a strict path when it comes to harm reduction. It's really about what the person would
Mhm.
like that to be, and what's safer for them, and whatever kind of path they're looking for or they're searching for or their goal is. But with somebody that struggles with substance use or is in recovery, or there's parents and things like that, concurrent disorders, right? Again,
Mhm.
big word. And to kind of tear it apart, it's just mental health. Somebody has mental health that also struggles with substance use or misuse.
Mhm.
And that's where the word concurrent disorders was created. What is your experience with that, if any?
Yeah, no. So I have concurrent disorders as well. I have a depression and anxiety, like peaks and valleys, right? I mean, highs and lows, and that's been the thing is there's a correlation between say depression or anxiety. You might drink to bring your anxiety down. I mean, ultimately, drinking will put it back up. But I mean, it's like a short-term fix, which is why people use substances in many cases to blunt any kind of wanting to feel. I mean, you get addicted to not feeling as much as you do um, the substance itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with your concurrent disorders, with depression, anxiety, you might be you might be using to block out to try to avoid that, even though ultimately that's going to be the thing that will even put you down further. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and living with it. I mean, I think I think addiction and and depression, anything like that. I mean, mental health is a toolbox. And over time, you accrue all these tools that help you keep your mind in a good place. And yeah, and over time, as you develop them, you can kind of know what tool to reach for when you need it to put yourself back into a good place.
Mm-hmm.
And having concurrent disorders, I found my formula, I think. But I mean, even so, you can plateau with your tools as well, and you have to fine tune them and everything like that. But I mean, it's a never ending process, and this is going to be my life for the rest of my life, and I've accepted that. So
Mm-hmm.
embrace it, and I just choose to try to learn as much as possible about myself, my mental health, and so I can continue in the most productive way possible, in the most happy way possible, for that matter.
Yeah, and you answered my next question, right? It's how you are right now and how you're living your life, and how your life is now worth living.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade my life for the world. I've gotten to do things that I never dreamt I thought I would ever get to do. I mean, and it's and coming from a place where I remember one of my lowest moments of my entire life was when I was on day 4, going on day 5, and without eating, not knowing if day 5 was going to be any different. And
Mm-hmm.
I was not only was I starving, but I was so depressed. Those were like the darkest thoughts I've had in my life went through, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And I mean, you'd be surprised at how far you can go from a point you thought was the end.
Mm-hmm. And now look at you. I mean, you are working on amazing things. You rode your bike across Canada, which is something that I admire because we've talked about this and I could never do that. That's a lot of cardio and a lot of,
Tell me about it. Yeah.
my body does not work that way. I'm not built like that. So I admire all of the things that you have done and you continue to do. And kind of to
Oh,
wrap it up, what message would you like others to hear or know, or what knowledge would you like to share with the people that are listening and hearing this?
it's a loaded question, but I'll do my best. I think it's important for people to understand, like I was saying, like it's in nobody grows up thinking they're going to be addicted to a substance. Nobody grows up. I mean, and the thing is, it's part of life, and it's your mental health that's serious. And like no matter how deep or dark of a hole you get to in that place, you can come back from it and turn your life into something beautiful. And you know what? And it's going to take time. It's going to be hard. again, peaks and valleys. That's the consistency of life. And I mean, and you know what, you might not do it your first time, you might not do it your second time, you might, I mean, fall down 9 times, get up 10. And no matter what, because of what happens is every time you fall down, I mean, because it took me dozen plus times to actually do it successfully. And I mean, every time I went backwards, I would beat myself up about it. And but the thing is, what I didn't realize until now is there, looking back, is that you take away a little bit more of a lesson every time you fall back down. Because it's forcing you to reevaluate everything to get back up. And I promise you, if you get back up just that one last time, that might be the difference of the whole rest of their life that you've always dreamt of living. So fall down 9 times, get up 10, and live the most beautiful life you can.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your wisdom and your story. And I'm sure you're going to inspire a lot of people. You have inspired a lot of people. You've inspired myself. So thank you so much for giving myself this opportunity to interview you, and for others to watch and to listen to all the wisdom that you have shared. So I appreciate.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to be partnered with Unsinkable and yourself. And I think it's amazing with the organization and what you are doing personally. And thank you guys for what you do.
Thank you.